Coming up on this week's edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
It's hats on the hill as we head to Washington, D.C. for NCBA's legislative conference. Plus, valuable information on how you can fight back against woody plant encroachment on your farm or ranch.
And now, NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
Hello and welcome to NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen. I'm Kevin Ochsner. Recently, cattlemen and women from across the country were in Washington, D.C. for the NCBA Legislative Conference. It was a chance to meet face-to-face with policymakers and deliver a united message about the issues and regulations that can impact the beef industry. Cattlemen to Cattlemen reporter Brad Bulla has more on this important event.
Each year, hundreds of cattle producers from across the country travel to Washington, D.C. to make sure their voices are heard by decision makers in our nation's capital. Attendees of NCBA's legislative conference get a chance to meet with elected officials to discuss the biggest issues in the cattle industry.
The legislative conference is an important meeting for us. This is where we get to come and see our elected officials and so forth and help them understand what the issues are for us.
You're going to have multiple individuals, literally hundreds, that are going to be up on Capitol Hill today and tomorrow, and they're talking about the issues that are important to their organization and what's important to them as a producer.
The three-day event, sponsored by Corteva, kicked off with a rooftop meet and greet, followed by an in-depth issues update led by NCBA's Washington, D.C. staff. Then it was time for Hats on the Hill, as cattlemen and women visited with lawmakers and their staff to explain how their decisions can impact farmers and ranchers nationwide.
Anytime you can talk to somebody face to face and start getting a personal connection, I think it's better than, just calling on the phone or sending a letter. If you have some personal connection, that goes a long ways to letting them know what's going on and being able to explain your story and tell them how we operate.
It brings a reality to what their decisions can happen, how their voting records affect what we do at home. It may be a simple task for them. It may be an onerous rule making for us to deal with at home. They need to be aware of that.
We have a good story to tell. We have the sustainability story. We have the animal welfare story. We have our WOTUS stories to tell how WOTUS is going to hurt us. We have a lot of stories, and they need to hear those stories in the individual districts across the country.
We have to continue reminding them and educating the new freshmen as they come in about our business, our way of life, and the fact that we raise food. We have to continue to be in food production to feed all these people.
They want to know details. They want to know the exact information that we are concerned about. And they want to be able to provide that solution. So that's the advantage of being back here, and that's why we continue to come back here.
Meeting with elected officials was just one part of the event. Many attendees also visited the federal agencies responsible for regulating how they do business on a daily basis.
So much of what happens to us as producers comes from the agencies, and people forget that. So the opportunity to meet those folks that are actually putting policy in place is critical.
So those are the guys that will enforce the laws and the rules that come out of Congress. So they need to understand that the paper pushing is easy, doing the work out in the country is hard. Help us make that easier.
This year, in conjunction with the legislative conference, the Environmental Stewardship Award program held a special celebration to announce the latest national winner and showcase this important program in our nation's capital.
Having the Environmental Stewardship Award here in D.C. was a nice change. It got a lot more people able to be involved on at the federal level and here at the agencies in town. And I heard there were some embassies here also just to see what we're doing. And it let different aspect of people see just what we do with the environmental stewardship and how important it is to the cattle producers in this country.
It's that program that tells the stories that are occurring all across the country. And what a better way to highlight what we do than have the national award given here so everybody can see the story and understand how we are America's conservationists.
All these events supplement the work done every day by NCBA's staff in their Washington, D.C. office.
Just having that face and presence every day to be our voice here makes it so all we have to do is come back once a year. We don't have to try and be here all the time because of our incredible staff.
Well, a lot of our staff are farm and ranch kids. They get it. They know what's going on. So they're invested, but we're the supplement to them. They know that we will reinforce the policies that our membership, grassroots-wise, has already voted in.
It's just good to know somebody's here while we're back home doing chores and taking care of the livestock. They're here doing what needs to be and fighting for us.
A strong showing for the Legislative Conference in Washington, D.C. helps remind lawmakers and regulators how their decisions impact the bottom line of our nation's cattle producers.
I asked a guy one time when I was here, do we do any good? And he said, what happens if you don't show up for the football game? Well, you forfeit. He said, you got to show up. And that's the truth.
So often it's easy to ignore us because we're out in the country. But when they have to see us and when they hear the real issues that are going on in our daily lives, it becomes way more impactful to them and we see results. And when you can do it with a group of like-minded individuals, our impact is magnified. So I invite everybody to come on to this for future years because this is how we help protect our operations.
Reporting from the Legislative Conference in Washington, D.C., I'm Brad Bullough for NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
And joining me now is Ethan Lane, Vice President of Government Affairs for NCBA. Ethan, it's an important week for the beef cattle industry here on Capitol Hill, and I'm curious, how do the activities of this week at the Legislative Conference help support the work you do every day here in D.C.?
Well, the folks that are in town this week are the reason we do what we do in Washington. So as good as me and my team are at delivering that message, nobody delivers the cattle producer's message better than a cattle producer coming to Washington straight from their operation with a list of concerns and challenges. That's what the members want to hear from. That's what the staff wants to hear from. And boy, it makes an impact when we have boots on the hill like we do this week in Washington.
So I'm curious, what do you hear from congressmen and their staff following this conference?
Oh, the follow-up list takes weeks to get through. You know, there's issues that we want to talk about during the week and things that are going on. And then there are the issues that our producers bring to the table right from their backyard that maybe didn't pop up on anybody's radar before. And those members of Congress and their staff are listening for those things. That's the real stuff they want to hear. You know, gosh, this is happening on the ground right now. We have 3 feet more snow than we were expecting. We don't have enough rain. Flooding. We're not getting payments fast enough from this program. Whatever that condition may be, that's the stuff they'll come back to us with in the weeks to come and say, what can we do to work with the industry to resolve this or help your producers on this issue? So we'll do a lot of follow-up over the next couple months, kind of running down those issues and making sure our producers are getting what they need out of Washington.
Well, there's no doubt there's some unique issues from one state to the next, but there are also some common issues you're asking everyone to make certain they tee up with their congressman and representative. What are some of those key issues?
Well, it's Farm Bill year, so obviously every agriculture conversation in Washington kind of ends back up in that Farm Bill conversation. So we are asking our producers to go to the Hill and talk about those things we're looking for in the Farm Bill. You know, the cattle industry is different than a lot of other parts of agriculture. We don't have large subsidy titles in the Farm Bill. We're looking for our voluntary conservation dollars that allow us to continue to be the most sustainable beef production system in the world. We're looking for those risk management tools that our producers, particularly our cow-calf producers, are using more and more. And we want to make sure there's adequate funding there for that. We want to make sure that those resources that we are building out in that FMD vaccine bank to have the ability to respond if, you know, we hope we never see an FMD outbreak again on American soil, but if we do, we have to make sure we're prepared here in the U.S. with vaccines. We have to make sure we have test kits, all the things we need to be responsive to that and get producers back online as quickly as possible. All that funding comes through the Farm Bill. So while we're worrying about how to spend $1.1 or $1.3 trillion, our asks are pretty modest in the grand scheme of things, but they're sure important to cattle producers.
So this is an important week, but what would you say to our viewers in terms of why it's so important to engage in the legislative and policymaking process throughout the year?
Somebody is engaging right now. no matter what the issue is, if you're not in Washington, D.C. telling your story, or you don't have someone in Washington, D.C. telling your story, I can guarantee you someone will come to this town and tell your story for you. So you have two choices. You can either engage in this process or it's going to happen without your input. And so it's critically important that these folks have gotten on airplanes, left their operations, come here this week and spend the week with us to get that story told, because man, it's the only way to really get that message across.
Well, thank you for all you and your entire staff do to organize such an effective process. We appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Membership drives this important work being done on Capitol Hill, and you can join by calling 1-866-233-3872 or visit the website ncba.org. Use the promo code C2C and you'll receive a voucher for a free 1-liter bottle of Sidectin Pour-On. When we come back, we'll have more on the recent legislative conference in Washington, D.C., including comments from the chairman of the House Agricultural Committee. Stay with us.
CattleCon 24 is marching onward to Orlando, January 31st to February 2nd, 2024. Have your say in the future of the industry, network with fellow producers, or connect with friendly faces. Plus, the NCBA trade show will be on site with over 385,000 square feet of the latest and greatest in the cattle business to help your operation stay competitive and sustainable. Learn more at convention.ncba.org.
It can be tough to keep up with all the issues that impact the beef cattle business. That's why NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen is dedicated to bringing you valuable news, information, and education. The goal is to give you the knowledge you need to make the best decisions for your operation. So if you're looking for in-depth coverage of the beef industry and the issues that matter to you, don't miss Cattlemen to Cattlemen, debuting every week on RFD TV and on YouTube.
Welcome back as we continue our coverage of the NCBA Legislative Conference. Joining us now is U.S. Representative Glenn G.T. Thompson. He's the chairman of the House Agricultural Committee. Congressman Thompson, thanks for joining us on the show this evening
Kevin,
and for this
so
event.
Glad to be here. Much appreciate the opportunity.
As you know, we had boots on the hill today in Washington, D.C. How valuable is it for congresspeople like yourselves and your staffs to hear directly from producers?
Well, it's incredibly important. There's a saying I learned, BC. Now that can either be before Congress or before children. Now, when it comes to public policy, if you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu.
Yeah.
Now I know our cattlemen want to be on the menu, but that's not what I'm talking about.
That's right.
And it is important. Now let me just say though, National Cattlemen Beef Association is at the table each and every day. You know, the NCBA has great people, this association. But there's nothing that replaces hardworking men and women off the ranch who take the time, they come to Washington, and they tell their story, right? They meet with their members, they meet with the members' staff, and they put a face in a story, and it's a great story to tell. And nobody will tell it better than the folks who are living it every day. So I think it's incredibly important.
That's really reassuring to hear. Now, as chairman of the House Agricultural Committee, you clearly play a pivotal role in the upcoming Farm Bill negotiations. I'm curious, what are some of the elements of this next Farm Bill that you think could impact beef cattle producers?
Well, I think there's a lot. Obviously, the disaster programs, the livestock specific programs when it comes to risk management, the animal health programs. You know, we have those tucked into the miscellaneous title, and I think most people understand that that's the best place for it to be, and it's important. So, when you think about risk management, it's and there's a lot of risk today, right, with this inflation.
Absolutely.
If you're ranching and you're raising these cattle, this livestock, I mean, it's a business, and in a business, it's not so important what you bring in, it's what you're left with when you pay the bills. And so those are the kinds of things that I think that are really important. Obviously, as we see animal health threats, we've seen this high path AI when it comes to poultry, ASF when it comes to pork.
Yep.
We knock on wood, I mean, I think we're getting prepared, but in the event of foot and mouth disease would ever come to this country, and we need to continue to double down on that. We need to make sure the vaccine, make sure the laboratory resources are there, and all the other programs that go with that. And then you put on top of that all the things we're celebrating here tonight.
Conservation.
In terms of stewardship, is conservation. There are no better stewards anywhere in the world than the American farmer, rancher, and forester. And this evening was such a privilege as we recognize the environmental stewards. And I know one family rose to the top out of Alabama. I'm real proud of them. That was wonderful. But every one of those folks are recognized in each region. I mean, that's just best practices, and there's nobody does it better anywhere in the world from a productivity, from an environmental perspective, from an animal health perspective than the American rancher. And I think we should be very proud of that.
We couldn't agree more. And I was going to thank you for coming and addressing this group tonight. I'm curious, after listening to the stories of 7 regional winners, what are some of your takeaways of what's going on from an environmental and conservation standpoint in the beef cattle industry?
It was just really reaffirming of the message that I've been talking about, how the climate heroes of the world are the American rancher, farmer, forester, and we saw that in motion, in practice tonight. These wonderful families all across the United States too, different places, a little different climates maybe, different terrain, and yet they're making it work. They're promoting conservation, soil health, efficiency, productivity, better tasting steaks at the end of the day.
That's right.
And that's what they're accomplishing. So it was nice to see these champions and to meet these families as well. It's just reaffirming that the message I've been sharing is spot on, and it motivates me to just be able to do more of that.
That's great to hear, and we very much appreciate you coming and supporting us, but more importantly for just being a friend to agriculture. Thank you for all you do.
No, Kevin, thank you so much.
Still ahead on Cattlemen to Cattlemen, we'll introduce you to the national winner of the Environmental Stewardship Award. Don't go away, we'll have more right after this.
It is inevitable, like the rising and setting of the sun. Your gravel driveway will need maintenance. Drudgery? Never. Be the right person with the right tools doing the job the right way by watching How to Maintain a Gravel Drive Using a Box Blade with Hydraulic Scarifiers. Brought to you by tipsnotebook.com. When better how-to videos are made, we will make them.
Join the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. NCBA is the oldest and largest national cattle industry organization working to defend your interests in Washington, D.C. And there are big benefits to being a member. You'll get news you can use in the National Cattlemen, email updates in the NCBA Beef Bulletin, plus big discounts only for NCBA members. Join by calling 866-233-3872 or online at ncba.org.
This beef quality assurance tip is funded by the Beef Checkoff.
Hi, I'm Courtney Gray, Director of Marketing and Industry Relations with the Pennsylvania Beef Council. I'm here today to share some beef quality assurance tips on vaccine management and safe handling. It's incredibly important when you're working with vaccines that you are following the proper management of those vaccines as directed on the label. Most vaccines require storage in a refrigerated area between 35 and 45 degrees Fahrenheit and require being stored out of direct sunlight. It's incredibly important that we follow those very basic tips in order to ensure their efficacy when delivering the product into an animal. In addition, you will want to follow the label instructions on where the vaccine should be administered. Beef Quality Assurance would recommend that you administer any injections forward of the shoulder and the triangle region of the neck. When you're working with vaccines chute side, you want to ensure that if you're storing vaccines in a cooler or moving vaccines from location to location, it's highly recommended that you stick a small thermometer in the cooler to ensure that those vaccines are kept safe. This also helps with employee management and safety of yourself as well as the livestock at the chute side. For more information on vaccine storage or animal handling in general, please visit bqa.org.
The Beef Quality Assurance Program is funded by the Beef Checkoff.
Welcome back to this special episode of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen. And here with me now is the 2022 national winner of the Environmental Stewardship Award, Carter Cattle Company from Alabama. Will and Monty Carroll and children Sarah Beth and Merritt, congratulations. How does this feel to be a national winner?
It is the honor of a lifetime and extremely humbling. Thank y'all.
Absolutely. Now, you said that you are the 6th generation and these two are the 7th generation on that home operation. And I think you made a comment in your video that you're just borrowing it from the next generation. Tell us a little bit about your hopes and dreams for these two as they grow up in this family business.
Monica?
Well, we just hope that they love the land and love the farm and just pass that love on to the next generation and just keep carrying it forward.
And you said something interesting, Monty Carroll. You said it's not hard to do something that you love. Tell us how that relates to conservation.
Well, I think we've been blessed with God's creation, and He gave us this portion to steward, and He called us to do it. And we take that calling seriously and to heart, and we do love it.
Will, you did seem so humbled and surprised that amongst this incredibly competitive lineup that you were selected as a winner. What would your message be to people at home saying, our operation isn't really good enough to be a regional or national winner? What would you tell them?
I would say that if a guy from Alabama can do it, anybody can do it. And it starts with just making small changes and moving in the right direction, small steps and one improvement after another. And get with your local NRCS and all your extension folks, and they can help you, and a good group around you, and you'll be successful.
Sarah Beth and Merritt, you've got big shoes to fill, but I'm pretty convinced you can do it. Congratulations to the Carter family. And now let's take a closer look at this year's 2022 National Environmental Stewardship Award winners.
The sustainability legacy of Carter Cattle Company began when their family settled in this part of Alabama in the 1820s. Veterinarians Will and Monty Carroll are the 6th generation to steward this land, and that tradition lives on in their kids. 75% of the Carter's land is located within the Pintlala watershed, and the family has built more than 1,300 feet of fencing to keep cattle out of the creek. They have also installed new water lines and troughs to ensure cattle always have adequate drinking water and can graze uniformly. Every day, the Carter family works to improve their environmental footprint, and the practices they use today will ensure the farm remains in the family for generations to come.
I think we have embraced the calling of stewardship because we love the land. It's hard not to do something that you love, so it comes natural for us. Some days are hard, but you love what you do, and it's so worthwhile. And with stewardship, just some small practices. The things we do aren't hard, they aren't rocket science, but they make a big difference.
My hope for the future of Carter Cattle Company is that it will continue to grow and continue to improve the resources that we have been blessed to care for. You know, the saying is, we just borrow it from the next generation, and it's so true. We've got to take care of this place so that it can take care of us and the next generation and the next generation and the next generation.
We're joined now by Damon Palmer, marketing leader at Corteva. Damon, you all have been sponsoring the Environmental Stewardship Award program for about 3 decades now. Why is this program so important to Corteva?
So at Corteva, we know that producers have choices in the products they buy. And going back 30 years ago now, somebody had a great vision to support a program in its infancy at that time, but one that we've continued with, and really trying to return a little bit of what producers give us back to the good of the industry. And the thing we love about this program is that it enables our producers and people that are in the ESAP program, it enables them to talk about all the advancements, all the stewardship they've got on their ranches.
It is an important program for the industry at large, and I would just ask you, put in your own words what this program means to the beef cattle industry.
Yeah, so I think this is, and I've been told this by folks within the industry, this is a premier award in the industry. I was amazed the first ESAP program that I came to, just the interest, the respect, and the engagement of the entire convention for the ESAP Awards. So this is very prestigious. It takes a lot when you look at everything that each one of these applicants do and they fill out. It's a lot of work, not just to get to the stewardship practices on the ranch. It's a lot of work to participate and nominate yourself for the program. And so it's definitely a premier award in the industry, and I would argue probably all of agriculture.
Absolutely. Now, we're also covering a legislative conference in this program. Of course, this is the first time that you all have supported and sponsored the legislative conference. Why is that so important to you all?
Yeah, so again, this is just another way that we try to give back to the industry. And I think we're all very aware that there's a lot of legislative efforts here at the federal level, but also across all 50 states. And so we wanted to take a little bit from what producers give us, give back, so that they can come to Washington, D.C. and advocate for not just their positions on legislation or policy, but also tell the story of what really goes on at the ranch. There's many policymakers, legislators that may not have the opportunity to get out to the ranch and see some of this stuff with their own eyes, and nobody tells it better than ranchers and producers themselves.
You know, stewardship and sustainability are buzzwords right now, but they're core values of you all at Corteva. Tell us about how you can help producers achieve the stewardship and sustainability goals they set for their own operations.
Yeah, so we really look at it a couple of different ways. The first is that we have a long line of products that are very familiar to many people within the industry, brands that have been in the industry for a long time, like the Graze-On Next brands. But we're also looking at new products with new stewardship and sustainability benefits, like our Land Visor technology that really helps ranchers in the Southwest control mesquite in a new way, utilizing remote sensing and satellite. And then also we're looking at how do we develop new active ingredients that have a better environmental footprint. So that's from the product and technology side. We also like to be very involved and have seats at the table in things like the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef and other things that are going on within the industry around sustainability, so we can help aid producers to make sure that they're represented well in many of these forums.
You all are very much true partners in our industry, and we appreciate your ongoing support. Thanks for coming, and thanks for your support of the beef cattle industry.
Yep, thank you, Kevin.
Now, if you'd like to find out more about the Environmental Stewardship Award winners, see photos and videos, or even learn how to nominate someone for the award next year, just visit the website environmentalstewardship.org. Still ahead on Cattlemen to Cattlemen, we've got details on a program from the Natural Resources Conservation Service that can help you fight back against woody plant encroachment. Stay with us.
Getting to run a family farm is a dream come true. When you can grow good grass, there's opportunity to grow plenty of weeds. We want to use the tools that will help us do a better job. I would like the legacy to be that we took really good care of the land and we truly did it as a passion and we did our very best for the right reasons.
Cattlemen and women are dedicated to managing their land and cattle in a sustainable way. They want to leave a legacy for future generations. For more than 30 years, the Environmental Stewardship Award has worked to honor these caretakers of the land and to share their stories. To find out more and to learn how you can nominate a farm or ranch for the Environmental Stewardship Award, visit the website environmentalstewardship.org. Did you know you can get reimbursed for attending cattle industry educational events? The Rancher Resilience Grant helps cattle producers attend valuable programs such as Cattlemen's College and Stockmanship and Stewardship training sessions. Local, state, and national events qualify for the grant, and successful applicants can receive money back to help cover registration fees and hotel expenses. To apply for the Rancher Resilience Grant, go to ncba.org and click on the Producer tab.
The effort to preserve and protect Great Plains grasslands is a fight that crosses state lines, and it requires ranchers, landowners, and a variety of groups to work together. Joining me now to talk about these efforts are NRCS leaders from 4 states: Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, and South Dakota. Thanks all for your time. The Great Plains are really home to some of the last true prairies in the world. Can you tell us about the grasslands in each of your states and their conditions?
So in Oklahoma, probably the major grasslands that we have is the tall, mid, and short grass prairies. And the condition that we have is a lot of encroachment. So we've lost a lot of what we historically had as native tall grass prairies especially, and in the short grass prairies.
Yeah, in Kansas, like Oklahoma, we have 3 primary landscape features: tall grass prairie, mixed grass prairie, and short grass prairie. And like Oklahoma, where our tall grass and mixed grass prairies are under extreme pressure from woody encroachment, our short grass prairies are also facing that to some degree, but also the other risk of tillage or conversion.
In Nebraska, it's the mixed grass prairie. We do have several intact larger areas of the prairie, but we are seeing the woody encroachment come into place as well in Nebraska.
For South Dakota, we really transition from west to east, short grass prairie to mixed grass prairie to tall grass prairie. And we are under threat of woody encroachment, mostly coming from the south, but in South Dakota, we are still sitting in a position where many, well, at least compared to the other 4 states, we have probably the greatest chance to get ahead of this.
You all have mentioned woody encroachment. It's definitely a threat to these grasslands. What are all your states doing to start addressing this and working with landowners and other groups to get ahead of it, to stay ahead of it, and really keep these grasslands intact or get them back intact?
Yeah, and in Kansas, when we initially started our discussions with our producers or ranchers, we were looking at what those threats were, what the science was indicating to us on that woody encroachment, and then laying out an opportunity for an initiative, if you will, an effort to address that woody encroachment in 3 focal areas in the state of Kansas. And so with that, then we did roll out an initiative that really kind of amplified the need of the local rancher, again being science-driven and being supported by the agencies and the partnerships in the state of Kansas.
I'd say one of the best tools that we have is fire and mechanical treatment of these woody species.
And in Nebraska?
In Nebraska, we focused on 4 core areas across the state. And we really worked with our private landowners to implement 3 conservation practices with the private landowners, the ranchers: prescribed burning, brush management, and pest management. So that's what we're doing in Nebraska.
For South Dakota, we are working with our conservation partners across the state to identify priority areas to really focus our funding across the state. But one of the most important things we're looking at is landowner education.
So you mentioned an initiative. How are your states working to organize these efforts through the Great Plains Grasslands Initiative?
Like the other states, working with our partners has been a big thing. And then the ranchers, the landowners that we have, those are really our key partners in being able to implement these practices and the know-how and getting the word out on this and the woody encroachment that we have. And so I think that voice has been one of our biggest help that we can have with the NRCS in this project.
So there's a lot of great conservation efforts underway with key partners through this initiative. How does that fit into USDA's commitment to and focus on climate-smart agriculture?
Yeah, great question. So Climate Smart is really about building a resilient climate base, using the prairies that we have in the biome. And so the primary threats, right, are the risk of conversion and woody encroachment. And I think probably the operative for us is looking at the prevented loss, right, of our prairies. And by that, we're keeping, the intent is to keep grass, or prairie, and intact. And then the second item is really trying to suppress or push back against the woody encroachment. Again, our grass prairies, our prairies really do the best job below ground of storing carbon, right? And above ground is just what we see, but the realization for us in our prairies is to manage effectively, right, the below ground effort of what that root system does. So just keeping grass, and keeping the woody encroachment off our prairies.
Well, speaking of keeping grass, I'd ask one final question of all of you. Our audience is cattle producers that are using this grass to turn and make food. So what's your advice to all of them about getting engaged in this effort and why it's so important to keep these ecosystems intact?
Majority of our producers are a generational producer. This education, it's important to understand that this woody encroachment takes away production. When we don't have that production, we can't run as many cattle. We don't have the wildlife, because a lot of us also depend on the hunting to keep the business going. And so this opportunity to work with us and to push back the woody encroachment keeps that family land very productive, and in turn, hopefully it keeps it coming or staying in the family for generations to come.
And they're really a key partner in all of this too, aren't they?
The advantage of working together, right, is that community-based infrastructure that we gain all the way up the food chain to getting beef on the table, right, which is really where the production side of things ends for our ranchers, is selling that. And so I think just that idea of a community-based approach and trying to generate enthusiasm and realizing, just like what Oklahoma mentioned, is feeling that pressure, right, is really, really incredible upon our ranchers.
You mentioned in South Dakota you have a chance to sort of get ahead of this issue a little bit. What's your message to producers in South Dakota to help?
Well, roughly over half of South Dakota, so 48 million acres, is grazing land. We do have a chance to get in front of this. Between our grazing operations, our producers, and wildlife, these are two industries that are just critical for South Dakota's way of life. And woody encroachment and invasive species in general is a direct threat to this way of life. So this is our opportunity to get on board and make a difference.
And in Nebraska?
I think that it really comes down to productivity, and it's our passion to keep the rangeland and the grassland productive, so our farmers and ranchers can keep growing the cows out there. And so that's the most important thing. And I would encourage the ranchers to stop in at their local USDA office and work one-on-one with the conservation planner to see exactly what they can do specific to their operation.
Well, I really appreciate not only your time with us here, but really all that you're doing to lead your state's efforts in the fight against this. I think there's no doubt that we need to keep, grasslands like we're standing in today available for use for good. Thank you all so much for joining us.
To learn more about assistance available through Working Lands for Wildlife, contact your local USDA Service Center or visit the website nrcs.usda.gov. Still ahead on Cattlemen to Cattlemen, we'll visit South Dakota for a closer look at how those cattle producers are dealing with woody plant encroachment. That story is just ahead. Stay with us.
Cattle producers across the country work hard to care for their animals and their land. The USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service is there to help. Find out how you can work with NRCS to develop a conservation plan for your operation. Find possible funding resources for implementing conservation practices, or get free expert advice on ways to improve your farm or ranch. Visit the website nrcs.usda.gov today.
Join the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. There are big benefits to being a member. You'll get industry news in the National Cattlemen, email updates in the NCBA Beef Bulletin, plus discounts just for NCBA members. Join by calling 866-233-3872 or online at ncba.org.
This beef quality assurance tip is funded by the Beef Checkoff.
Hi, I'm Dan Buskirk, Beef Extension Specialist with Michigan State University with a beef quality assurance tip. Using the injection triangle in the neck eliminates beef product defects in more valuable cuts of the carcass, such as the top butt and the round. And blemishes in the neck are more easily trimmed or easily removed at harvest. Always administer injections according to the manufacturer's labeled instructions, and when the label allows the choice of route of administration, choose subcutaneous over intramuscular to further reduce the possibility of injection site lesions. The lower boundary of the injection triangle is above the cervical vertebrae in the middle of the neck. The upper boundary is below the nuchal ligament, which is 2 to 3 inches below the top line. The posterior boundary of the triangle is in front of the shoulder. Regardless of the age of the animal, do not give injections in the rear leg or the rump. Make certain everyone on your team is BQA certified and uses the injection triangle. For more information on injection site management and record keeping, visit bqa.org.
The Beef Quality Assurance Program is funded by the Beef Checkoff.
Earlier in the show, we talked about how farmers and ranchers in the Great Plains region are dealing with encroachment from unwanted trees. Now, we head to South Dakota, where Brad Bulla has a look at some of the steps those cattle producers are taking to fight back.
The Great Plains region of the U.S. is home to some of the last continuous grasslands on Earth. It covers all or part of 10 states and provides valuable grazing for cattle as well as habitat for wildlife.
Great Plains reach from Canada all the way down into Mexico, and they're a really important flyaway for many different migratory birds. It's not only the flyaway, it's nesting grounds. The grasslands are also important to the cattleman who wants to raise his calf crop on these grasslands because of the forage they provide.
Unfortunately, fast-growing, drought-tolerant trees are taking over this valuable landscape. Although millions of new saplings sprouting each year might seem like a good thing, in reality, their spread is upending this ecosystem. It's a big problem, especially in South Dakota, where cattle producers are losing grazing land to woody encroachment.
It's important to control woody encroachment in the Great Plains because as the woody species encroach on our grasslands, it displaces forage, which is really important for our cattle producers across the state of South Dakota and across the Great Plains as well.
This area, the south central part of the state along the Missouri River on both sides, this 4-county area is really ground zero of how bad the woody encroachment can get. Everybody just realized that there is a big problem here. They're losing rangeland, losing grazing to these cedar trees.
With the cedars, there's no biodiversity. There's no understory, there's no grasses, there's no insect life. So for even just for hunting specifically alone, we lose our mule deer habitat, we lose our sharp-tail habitat, even the turkeys don't go in them. So once a cedar area is fully canopied, it's biologically sterile. So we lose production of grasses, any forbs. It's basically a desert in our place.
There's nothing prettier than seeing grass, beautiful grass, without weeds, without all the trees. And I don't know what the percentage of trees are here, but it's huge on this ranch. I could run a lot more cattle on here if the trees were taken care of.
The traditional methods for clearing rangelands of these invasive species have relied on heavy mechanical equipment, such as bulldozers or large tree shears. But these methods have proven both cost-prohibitive and ineffective. That's why many in agriculture have turned to prescribed fire as a way to address the growing challenge of unwanted trees. As many cattle producers know, fire can be a powerful tool to help control invasive species and improve forage resources.
The reality of it is that there's just so crazy many cedar trees that you have to have more than one means to get control of them. And fire is one thing that you can come in with periodically, 3 or 4 or 5 years down the road, and really have a significant impact on the regrowth of trees.
I was mechanically cutting them and piling them, and the little ones come everywhere, millions of them. In 3 years, they were this tall and they were everywhere. And I could not imagine how to get rid of those other than fire, because eventually they're just going to keep growing. And then I got to go cut them again, Well, it's just repeating. In my experience, fire killed the seeds and the little ones in a lot of places. So I think fire is a huge tool.
The only way for me to control woody encroachment or cedars is by fire. Selectively cutting where I can to produce the heat to control these woody species. Upslope fires, using the wind, using the terrain in my advantage, but fire is the main tool I'm using to control them.
One important ally is the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service and its Working Lands for Wildlife initiative. This framework offers farmers and ranchers valuable advice on the voluntary programs they can utilize to help protect and improve the resources in their care.
We have a couple different Farm Bill programs that can offer cost share assistance with the deferment and the brush management activities, and even the prescribed burn as well. We also have technical assistance available where we can help provide some assistance with writing a prescribed burn plan, as well as developing conservation plans so a producer knows, like, okay, we can do the brush management this year and then we should follow it up with a burn.
The experts agree, now is the time to begin fighting back against these invasive trees, rather than waiting to react after they have overtaken an area.
This part of the state is actually a pretty good example for other areas of South Dakota that haven't been hit as hard as they have been here. We're like, well, come down to Gregory County along the river and this might be what you'd be dealing with in 30 years if you don't start taking action now.
If you're waiting till it gets bad, the value of your land is going down, the cost to clear it is going up each year, and it's just a no-win situation. If you really want to do something with that land other than just have a cedar forest, you just got to make a choice and do it.
Livestock producers across the Great Plains are working hand in hand with agencies like NRCS to find solutions to the woody encroachment problem. The efforts of these hardworking families will ensure their lands are around for future generations.
What can I leave for my family? I've got 4 kids. I would like to give them the option to do something with that land, but make it worth something, rather than just a cedar-infested few acres that really wasn't worth much at all.
I just always have wanted to make what I have, what I was able and blessed to be able to either purchase or rent, better than the way I found it. I just want to pass it on to my family and work to make it better for them.
And we have all these parts working together, from landowners to the operators to our partners. We all have the same goals in mind, having a place that we can sustain, enjoy, and make it as fertile and as rich as we can.
Reporting from South Dakota, I'm Brad Bola for NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
Remember, if you have conservation practices you'd like to put in place on your operation, you should start by visiting with your local NRCS office about the financial and technical assistance they can provide. Go to their website, nrcs.usda.gov, to find an office near you. We're back with more Cattlemen to Cattlemen right after this, so stay with us.
Have you ever dreamed of owning a brand new John Deere Gator? Well, now's your chance. The National Cattlemen's Beef Association is conducting an online auction for a new Gator, and all proceeds will support their efforts on Capitol Hill on issues that directly impact cattle producers. It's part of John Deere's long-term commitment to the beef industry and NCBA.
We actually have a sponsorship that we've had for many years with the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. John Deere is committed to those folks. We're committed to the beef producers. We're committed to make sure that you have the equipment to do the job, perform very well, and we are making sure that we are supporting the NCBA every year.
There will be several Gators auctioned off throughout the year, so you'll have many chances to bid. Go to ncba.org and click on the banner with the John Deere Gator, or scan the QR code you see on the screen to place your bid.
CattleCon 24 is marching onward to Orlando, January 31st to February 2nd, 2024. Have your say in the future of the industry, network with fellow producers, or connect with friendly faces. Plus, the NCBA trade show will be on site with over 385,000 square feet of the latest and greatest in the cattle business to help your operation stay competitive and sustainable. Learn more at convention.ncba.org.
If you're looking for the best in cattle industry news, information, and education, then don't miss NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen. Each week we cover important topics such as herd health and cattle handling, plus updates with congressional and industry leaders about today's top policy issues, and stories shot on location at cattle farms and ranches around the country. Don't miss NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen on RFD TV and on YouTube.
Throughout this episode, we've given you a look at the NCBA Legislative Conference. And there's another important event coming up, the Cattle Industry Summer Business Meeting, where members of the beef industry will come together to discuss current issues, work on programs and initiatives, and make plans for the upcoming fiscal year. It'll be held July 24th through the 26th in beautiful San Diego, California. You can get details on how to attend at the website ncba.org. We're wrapping up this episode of Cattlemen to Cattlemen with one more look at Hats on the Hill and some of the folks who gathered at the NCBA Legislative Conference. Well, that wraps up this edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen. Thanks so much for spending time with us. We'll see you again next week, right here on RFD TV.